Thank you all for joining us. This is Filecoin Core Devs number 53. Today in the Western Hemisphere, it is Thursday, the 5th of January. Elsewhere, it is Friday the 6th. I expect we're going to have quite a bit of conversation today, specifically around the Filecoin Network 18 upgrade, and also the sector duration multiplier FIP draft that this Crypto Econ Lab team has been so diligently working on. And as always, at the end, plenty of time for Q&A if there's any walk-on topics that anyone would like to propose. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Vic, who has graciously agreed to join us, even though he is still on holiday break.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, Caitlin?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so this one will just be about the SCM FIP, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. We put in a new draft a couple of weeks ago, and then recently Crypto Econ Lab followed up with some analysis and modeling regarding the question of whether or not it should apply to all sectors or only newly onboarded sectors. This was posted by Tom, a couple of days ago. I think the goal here should be to have an open discussion with core devs about, number one, aligning on the importance of this being implemented in NV18, which is between March 1st and March 15th. And then the second question is specifically how we feel about which version of the policy kind of enters the network. I think there's broad alignment that some version of the SDM, whether that be all sectors or just newly onboarded sectors or some kind of caveat of those two kind of combinations is better for the network overall, given the current macroeconomic conditions, which Crypto Econ Lab has talked about kind of at length. So this one here is what is the best way to move forward regarding these small policy kind of nuances to the FIP, knowing that it is probably beneficial that some version of the SCM FIP lands sooner rather than later in the network, sooner being NV18 in early March. With that, I think maybe this is a good time to just kind of have an open discussion if people have thoughts on this kind of parameter or policy question. But if anyone has any questions regarding the FIP itself or wants to take a step back, I'm also, me, ZX, Tom, and Dave, I think are here, and Kieran as well, so we can answer some of those questions. I guess one last thing to add at a higher level is when it comes to from a network health perspective, from the perspective of encouraging capacity, not just onboarding but retention, Crypto Econ Lab would advocate for a version of the policy entering the network where this applies for all sectors, meaning that if SPs can extend sectors and receive the SCM, they don't have to kind of reseal the sector in order to receive the multiplier when it's onboarded. That is our firm recommendation, but keep in mind the fact that we do think it's better to have some version of the SCM rather than nothing.
Sorry, can you just repeat that last bit? I had a hard time hearing you now.
Yeah, sorry, Ayush. I was just saying that the pretty firm, strong recommendation from CEL, also given the relevant modeling that we just released, is for a version of the policy to be the one where it applies to all sectors. So when I say all sectors, I mean extended sectors as well as newly onboarded ones, rather than the policy only applying to newly onboarded sectors. So if you're an SP and you want to extend and receive the sector duration multiplier, you can do so without having to recommit a sector to do in order to gain that QAP multiplier. So that's it.
I have a question for Jenny. I feel like you made a comment in December, but what's the level of effort associated with applying it to all sectors, and is that feasible in the shorter term?
That's a very the short answer is yes. It's just all timeline and prioritization. It's feasible to do that. Thank you, Vic, for the update. I feel like maybe we can. It's actually really good if we can just jump into my session, which is gonna lead a discussion on defining the scope of NV18, which we can further discuss whether we should include SDM in this upgrade or not, and if so, which option we should do. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. If everyone is kind of if there are no more questions on SCM, we can talk about how it should and may fit into NV18. That sounds good.
Do we does anyone has a question on SDM particularly?
I just want to make sure to say thank you for the people doing the analysis on this discussion, or the policy decision between new sectors versus all sectors. It's much more comforting to like try to make this decision, understanding what and I understand these are modeled impacts. We're not predicting the future here, but these are projections about what would happen under certain assumptions. But it's much better to be making these kind of decisions, having done that thought and modeling, imperfect as it is. So I want to say thank you very much for doing that. Yeah, appreciate it.
Also, Tom and Kieran really did a lot there as well. So it was really good to have that. So it's also to answer that question, but yeah, CEL thanks you, Alex.
Okay, maybe I can give some quick NV18 updates. Since everyone had hopefully everyone had a relaxing holiday. We did do some work, so I have some updates for everyone. Next slide. So quickly, our agenda on this topic today, others of the updates, I'm going to give an engineering and governance update. I'm going to set the goal for this call, and then we're going to go into the scope and timeline discussion. And last but not least, we can discuss what are the next steps should be taken according to our final decision that we're about to make. Let's jump into the updates. Right before we go to the holidays, we have locked down the scope consideration of this upgrade. So there are all the FIPs that was proposed to be considered, including FEEV, any FIP that's FEVM related, FIP 47 power security FIP, which was accepted already, FIP 42, which increased max sector duration commitment, I believe, to 3.5 years or 5 years, but that's a single parameter change, and also of course SDM. Since then, within the core dev, we have been making some trade-off, analyzing the timeline. Before the holiday, we were on the soft consensus that we will be having a February upgrade that's only about FEVM. But since then, FEVM team has been writing a lot of the FIPs and doing a lot of engineering development. And after coming back from the holiday, when we reanalysis the critical the progress and also all the timeline dependency, we realized that we are slightly behind on the FIP writing because the gas benchmarking is taking longer than expected, and the team needs more time so that we make the right choices on the FEVM gases. And with that being said, because of the engineering work needed there, we cannot have a FIP going through the governance process without the final gases. And given the FIP process also have a very strict, review timeline, that adds on some delay in the February timeline. We are also special call out. We are also constrained. There are special consideration is that the Chinese New Year is from the January 22nd to the January 31st. We will have the whole Venus out to enjoy their holiday with the families. We are also going to have the Chinese community out of office during that period. What does that mean is that we cannot perform any calibration upgrades during that period because a huge amount of the community member will be out, and one of the core implementation team will be out of office. All that being said, so for all the detailed timelines, tasks, breakdowns, you can find on this page that I link in the Zoom chat, which we can share with the public community after this call as well. So with everything being said, assuming we are still remaining the discussed scope to only have FEVM in NV18, the new projected timeline is we can kick off the hyperspace, which is the newly launched developer-focused perpetual testnet on January the 16th. We will kick off a space warp hackathon for FEVM from January the 20th to February the 10th. We're going to have a calibration upgrade on February the 6th to introduce FEVM, and most importantly, we are going to launch FEVM to the Filecoin mainnet by March the 1st. Again, all these timeline are our targeted timeline and is subject to change according to development, audit, and governance process. Any questions so far? Next slide. So that's everything we have again before the holiday. So what happened during the holiday? People were actually like doing work, which including thanks to the CEO, they have been doing more analysis and compare between the 4 options that they proposed for SDM, and we have more information that like Vic just said, they have data to show that if SDM can be applied to all the sectors, it is more beneficial for the network than only apply SDM to the new sectors, which is like a new information that we have, because like the current proposed like fifth draft only including to the new sectors. Another piece of new information again is like the updated FEVM timeline. One of the core reasons that we were not considering SDM is because of the engineering resource constraint and the very ambitious like timeline. So we said if we are aiming for a February launch for FEVM, yet it is almost impossible from an engineering resource perspective, it's almost impossible to also include SDM and potentially FIP47 and some like necessary bug fixes. Now, again, that's changed. So given the new timeline information, what I am hoping to do today is like to reach consensus on the final scope, especially on whether we should be including SDM or not in this call. And with the final scope defined, the core dev should commit to a timeline for the upgrade for the sake of community as well, because a lot of people are waiting for the FEVM launch. So that's our goal today. So jumping into how we can slowly move into consensus. So everyone probably has, so like yesterday I had posted this like decision matrix to compare the options that we have. So there are like 8 options there. I know it was a lot, but like on high level, we can categorize them into this like the following. First is like, don't change the scope, only do FEVM. We have been planning FEVM for the past 8 months now, I would say. It's been a long time cooking. A lot of like community effort, ecosystem effort has been building around like FEVM. Our very like initial timeline of launching FEVM was actually kind of like late Q4 in 2022. So like according to that timeline, we are kind of, you know, slightly behind already. So like, you know, if we do want to launch like FEVM, like sooner rather than later for all the amazing ecosystem benefit and network like improvement that like we are expecting, we should stay just FEVM only. However, as CL, as like Stefan has like posted a discussion in the community like forum, suggesting there are a couple like challenges the network is facing, including macro economy, storage provider like growth and their business and all those reasons. We probably should take some actions to support our community to maintain a healthy like network status. One of the solution being proposed again right now is SDM. So how urgent are those problems? Can SDM be one of the solution that, you know, immediately mitigate some of the problem right now? it's possible. That's why maybe we should consider including an SDM along with FEVM. And the other thing we should consider is like SDM will like extend the sector duration to 5 years, then there may raise a whole security concern. Then do we want to launch, should we like avoid that by implementing FIP 47? So that's all the options that we have. Oh, of course, there's another one that Vic already mentioned. If we include SDM, should we apply to all the sectors or only newly onboarded sectors? So I think like everyone here probably has to read all the operations and like potential trade-offs. So what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna propose gathering all the information. I have been working engaging in this for the past months, gathering all the information. I will recommend what I think is the best, and I'm gonna explain my reason, and then the core devs can, you know, leave your feedbacks, objections, and then we can take the discussion from there. Does that sound good? Or any questions so far? So as the network upgrade coordinator, just like for this one, taking in all the feedbacks, I am as the Lotus, also like with the input from the heavily from the Lotus team, we are proposing that we should only include FEVM and commit to a March 1st upgrade. Main reason being, again, FEVM has been one of the top priority for the network, defined as one of the top priority for the network since last June. We have been working on that for 8 months, and it is important for us to ship that not only just for the protocol, but also for our community and a lot of like business that is building on top of VM to have that feature launched in the network. Only shipping FEVM also means we will have a super light migration across like upon the upgrade. We have analysis the implementation of SDM. No matter which option we go with SDM, migration, sector info migration is absolutely needed. We recently has like went through a sector info migration in the last upgrade, the Shark thing, and it was not too bad, but it was quite challenging for some node operators because upon heavy migration, the memory usage on the node is like higher, and it adds risk for the node operators to go out of sync with the network. So in the last upgrade, we have exchanges like Coinbase and also our main service API service provider like Glyph, all their like Sondex, all their nodes had challenges of like going through the migration and keep in sync with the network. From my perspective, for the FEVM launch, it is one of the most important upgrade that so far, like since mainnet that we are trying to do. So like if we can avoid any additional rollout risk, that would be amazing. So that's why like any solution that can avoid a migration is what's like in favor here. And also last but not least, is that to implement like SDM or anything that's needed for supporting SDM, currently we haven't done any engineering work on yet. So there are potentially unforeseen like challenges on the implementation, and we probably need to spend more time to work on Lotus to make the migration risk lower in support of a successful like FEVM launch. So that adds more risk onto the upgrade like timeline. And again, like with everything being said, to make sure we can launch FEVM sooner rather than later, we are proposing to only include FEVM in this upgrade. Now this is the time. If you have questions or you have feedbacks or you have objections or you think there are things that we are missing, please raise. Don't be shy.
It's a hard decision. I think there are multiple options that would be sort of acceptable and very hard ahead of time to understand which one is like, strictly superior. But if we go this way of scoping down the upgrade to be strictly the FVM in order to give us maximum certainty and lowest risk for that, then I would, as I have before, urge that we need to turn around another network upgrade after that as soon as possible. I would want to be targeting 6 weeks or something for network 19 to follow. I don't want us to start thinking about network 19 in March.
Yeah.
Totally agree with Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say something I would be slightly worried about is that the date has slipped already a little bit for FVM that's being pushed forward. I mean, it could be pushed forward again, and this is all more time during which some of the issues that the sector duration multiplier proposal is trying to address, these may not get better by themselves.
This is a very, very good point. So in my documentation, I actually said, I think core dev here should align. No matter what, we should commit to perform, like ship one upgrade for the community in Q1. If FVM further slip to a timeline that is going to be post, after like March, we still should perform an upgrade, but including other fit protocol changes that will benefit the network. What that means is like, even if SDM is not gonna, for now, it's not gonna be included in NV18, implementation teams should start implementing SDM and FIP47 to have the code ready and to ship in March if necessary. Does that make sense, by the way? Yeah. Okay.
Jennifer, can I ask a question? Also, a quick side note. I can't see the chat, although I can see there's a lot of comments coming in. So if you do have a question, either Jennifer, if you could call on people, or folks, if you could raise your hand. My question is, if we push for a really quick upgrade in NV19, specifically focused on SDM, I assume that's not going to give us enough time to do impact modeling on gas changes, for example, for FEVM and NV18. And it's not going to necessarily change the parameters, as far as I understand it, around migration complexity. So is actually pushing off SDM into NV19 going to substantively change the risk calculation here in a way that is worth doing a very quick follow-on upgrade?
Sorry,
Does that question make sense?
can you repeat it?
Yeah, so if I understand correctly, there's like two major issues with including SDM in NV18, correct? It is the complexity of migration for sectors, regardless of whether it's all sectors or new sectors. And then there's also just risk management, right? We're introducing FEVM. If we introduce SDM2, it may be very difficult to accurately predict what impact it's going to have on the network. What I'm asking is, if we're saying, well, maybe we should consider delaying SDM to an NV19 upgrade very quickly after NV18, and we're looking at potentially a timeline of only 6 weeks. My question is, it's almost a hypothetical, but is 6 weeks really enough for us to say that the risk or our ability to manage or measure it, is it significantly lower to warrant waiting instead of just including it in NV18?
Gotcha. That's a very good question. From the migration risk that we're suggesting, like I said, we have been doing like sector info migration in the past. It's acceptable. Like in the past, we have been defining the potential rollout risk is like acceptable for the network, and we have been proven so, like just by the shock itself. The only thing that changes, like again, if VM is bigger than like ever, so like that's why we don't want to add that complexity to this particular upgrade. So if it's in NV19, again, at first, like I don't expect anything to go bad with like migration. We'll do a lot of testing, but if it's in a separate upgrade, I think it's more like manageable on this like rollout shot. But like on the CE impact, I'm not the best person to answer this question, so I'm going to leave it to others. But my gut feeling is like, if EVM potentially will bring crypto, like, not crypto econ, but like economy changes to the network, and it's definitely like worth monitoring. I think it's up to the core devs to decide later on how long we should be monitoring the network, and then further consider if SDM is still the right solution for the problem we are trying to target to solve after the launch.
Thanks. Also, I think Molly, you have your hand raised.
Thanks. Sorry, I have to switch between 7 screens in order to find chat on mobile. Yeah, I was just going to second Jennifer's point that like there's going to be enough complexity with analyzing the network after FEM launches and monitoring to respond to challenges. What happened last time is our monitoring went down over the network because of the large network upgrade. So we actually were flying blind for a couple of hours, which is always a very concerning place to be in. And if you have a migration that's happening at the same time, you increase the risk of that sort of thing. And so that's why decoupling it into two, I don't think we're scared about this upgrade in particular. We just don't want to add any additional moving pieces when it comes to FVM. I do think if there's a way that we can do the upgrade, or you can include this improvement that doesn't sacrifice FVM, then that's good. But we don't necessarily want to take do an improvement that we think is subpar, or like not effective, not good for the network. I think it is more worthwhile to aim for doing two and getting on a cadence of faster network upgrades. I think that is a good, healthy place for the Filecoin network to be. We've talked about it before, and that but that I think that goes to like all core devs. Like, can we aim for something like a 6-week network upgrade after FVM? Is that feasible? Jennifer, to your point on like trying to do one if FVM slips, to then suddenly switch pace to do another one before. Like I hear you, and I like, yeah, like that sounds great, but I don't think in practice we would make that choice, right? Like we'll get to end of February, and suddenly to switch pace and try and do a different network upgrade. Like I don't think we'll end up in that situation, most likely. And so I think it really hinges on doing an upgrade shortly after FVM and having the teams work on it in parallel so that can be baking and testing while FVM launch is happening.
I guess one more question I have from that makes sense. Just really quickly from like a being expedient perspective, when something is implemented and also when it goes through the governance process are completely decoupled, right? Like a FIP can be accepted and then it can be implemented whenever. Like the fact that maybe it might not be implemented in the protocol in NV18 is not a reason why I can't enter last call sooner, so the network knows that this will be part of the protocol at some point, just to confirm we're on the same page here.
Yeah, that's correct. And also ideally in the future, we shouldn't be, scheduling things for last call for an upgrade. We just have to do that for expedience sake. But you're right, we could start last call tomorrow if you decided that was prudent for what your team has proposed, and still say it will go in an NV19.
The reason I say this is also from like a signaling perspective. It may be good for people to know that something like an STM is available, especially if it applies for all sectors, and that will happen at some point within, let's say, the next 3 or 4 months. I think that's good for people to have that knowledge when it comes to their business planning, especially for SPs.
For what it's worth, I think you're right. And my preference here is actually for that very reason. I don't think we should jump into last call immediately, but I think we should have it completed before we publicize or become very vocal about NV19. I think it'll give us some good distance while still allowing us to be quick. I think that's totally correct.
And to follow up on what Molly suggested, definitely like she pointed out like last time, like our monitoring system had a fallout on the node, and we did have a monitoring system to monitor the network health for like half a day for the Shark upgrade. But like we did a retro with the team and identified a couple improvements we can make in Lotus to support like more like node operations. So we do have a couple solutions that we have in the backlog. It's just like implementing those, like taking like engineering resources, and I had 80% of that Lotus engineering Lotus engineers are fully support FEVM development right now. So like if we put any other people working on improving migration at the moment, it may slow down FEVM development. Like also like Molly said, also, I believe Alex mentioned the same thing. We should invest more time to identify why right now why the Filecoin network can only perform an upgrade every 3 months at the moment, and what's the gap? Like how can we improve that? And hopefully we can ship another upgrade like sooner and include like SDM changes. Like I mentioned earlier, even if SDM is not included in NV18, we tend to start like implementing that just so that the solution is ready whenever and like whenever we are ready to include that in upgrade, we can like act on it. And last but not least, I do want to mention in the past like 3 weeks, there are other solutions being proposed, including this one, like FIP discussion 583, thoughts on the scaling dilemma for SPs and potential solutions. A lot of those solutions proposed are mentioned can be implemented on smart contract on top of FEVM. So that opens up more opportunity for us on like, for us back in the future. So that's another thing to consider. And CX has ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to summarize what we were chatting about in the chat as well. I think we're fully on the same page regarding like we should ship FEVM sooner, and then like if we can commit to like 6 weeks right after, that sounds good. But I mean that's something that we can still discuss. But then the other thing is, I think from our side, I think the conclusion from the analysis was having SDM in any form sooner is like always better. And I think the holdup from our read is the state migration, right? And that's why I was pushing back and challenging on like I want to dig deeper into what exactly that result in the state migration. So in our mind, when we say all sector, I think like what we just mean that we enable SDM for extension, but when we say new sector, you just be like, you only get it when you add like a new sector. So there could be a role where we let's say there's like no state migration needed for new sectors. We only do that for new sectors for, let's say, network 18, right? So that shouldn't add any state migration cost. And then if we were to follow up to enable any of the extension, then we could do that in a separate upgrade.
And that is not true. Zen, do you want to?
Yeah, so I don't know if we'll be able to hash it out right now, but so we were talking a bit in the chat, myself and ZX. So after talking with Tom today and just looking over the FIP and trying to understand some of the implicit assumptions, it really looks like we do need another field in the sector info if we want to get the power based off of sector info. So a requirement of the system is that we can compute QA power just from a raw sector info. In order to do that with the new SDM, we need to compute SDM from sector info. And the thing that I learned today is that SDM upon an extension should not reflect the total lifetime of the sector from activation to like latest expiration, but should rather reflect the time period from latest extension points or base power epoch from a related concept of Alex to the upcoming expiration. And this means that we don't have enough information inside of the sector info to get this SDM. One thing that kind of came up in the chat was that if we wanted to create a requirement that no new sectors made after MV18 can be extended, then we could probably get SDM without a migration, but that seems like probably unworkable. I think that is like the place we'd have to go to get SDM working without a migration.
Thank you, Sam. There's a suggestion in the chat is like to take further design discussion to another venue, just to over communicate like say X when we say the migration is needed for sector extension, it's not for a sector, it's not for like SDM applied to existing sectors and for existing sectors to enjoy SDM upon extension. It applies to any sectors onboarded after SDM is the same, and to further extend it like in the future requires migration. Maybe that's a gap here.
I understand. I'm just saying we can separate that, but we don't have to talk about this here.
Sounds good. Alex has a hand.
Yeah, thanks. I'm somewhat more, I have a bit more enthusiasm than Molly for exploring how we can be prepared to, if FVM does end up slipping the timeline, which 3 months out or 2 months out, still reasonably possible, being prepared to ship an SDM related set, like basically everything else except FVM that's in this trade-off. I think it's worth exploring how to make that possible. There will be some like cutoff date where like if we don't launch the testnet with this new thing by this date, then we can't hit some date. But I do think it's worth us trying to understand what would need to be true for us to do that, and doing the implementation work for SDM 914, FIP47, like getting that all up into a integrated branch that we could turn into a network. I would hate to be in a situation where it is February and FVM is not going to make their much. They're behind by 2 weeks or whatever. I don't want them to be in a place where this intense time pressure from continually setting targets and missing causes them to make bad engineering decisions. We're in a way worse state if they make a poor engineering decision because of time pressure. Flipping, in hindsight, when we'd come back in hindsight and say, man, I wish we'd just done the SDM in January, and then FVM was going to be in April anyway. I'm not saying we're going to be April, but we have an opportunity here for a much generally, tightly scoped upgrade that can step in and provide great benefit to the network if the FVM is still underestimating their complexity. So let's like just see if it's possible. I agree there'll be some date after which we can't make that call, but I don't think we're at that date yet.
This is something maybe I can take on, like maybe what I can work on, like maybe starting next Monday, is to say if we only do SDM and like FIP47 and the activation bug fix, what's the engineering timeline looks like, and what's the deployment timeline looks like, and give whatever update and propose some cutoff timeline for the decision making.
Yeah, I expect there's not a whole lot of code involved there. The biggest one is already written, FIP47. It's integration work and so on. And I saw already you filed an issue for prototyping the SDM, which will flush out any remaining dependencies. Yeah, thanks.
If you're okay with it, I would like to spend a minute just describing a world in which we kind of want to get the biggest upgrade possible. I want to see if we are all on the same page about the work needed. From my perspective, it's obviously prototyping and actually implementing and integrating the SDM flip itself, landing FIP47, which is in a reasonable state to be done, getting the designs themselves and implementing the migrations for them. And this is honestly where we've often wound up running into issues, bugs, and so on. So one suggestion I would make is to be very clear about what migration stuff is needed from the get-go. And then kind of we can treat it as optional, improving client-side migration performance impact. This is a bit of a learning that we got from the Shark upgrade, where while the migration was successful and the network was obviously fine, our users, at least Lotus users, were a little unhappy. And we were, as Molly said, we were in a bad place for somewhere between 2 and 12 hours. Lotus kind of had a takeaway that we would fix this before we next had a large migration. So ideally we'd get to that as well. That is not the most amount of work. That's not the largest volume of work, especially as the FVM continues to develop. It's a core part and deals with audits and so on. So from that perspective, I think if we can find owners for these issues, and if we can, number one, come to a decision tonight and find owners for these issues for the various work streams, I think there's an argument that it is doable at a March 1st to March 15th timeline. Obviously, we're talking about a FIP that hasn't been written, let alone accepted yet, I think. But if there's anything I'm missing, or if there's anything that surprises people, I'd like to quickly just like raise those flags now, because I think that's very germane to this decision.
I guess the question is to the implementation team. Is like Steven or like Josh is here from the Forest team. Like I said, many of the Lotus engineers supporting FEVM development. Is there any bandwidth from your side to help on this upfront as well, so that Lotus team maybe can spend time on, migration mitigations or like other implementation? I see no. Oh, Josh, go ahead.
I mean, I can ask Lee about it, or Lee or David. I mean, I don't think I would be qualified to answer that question, but I can check with them.
From Villa's team, I think the thing is that we have change new year. So fortunately we have if we support FEVM, I think that's okay, because FEVM is actually about the building actors, right? So we'll do the integration and also some other updates that will be fine. For the migration, if we support SDM, we may need a little bit longer time, but I would think that if we only support the new sectors, we need to, it might be okay. But it will also depend, depending on how many days the team will take for the vacation.
Understood.
Yeah.
We also need to take into consideration that like Venus team also have to be implementing FEVM into their implementation as well, and related features. So it might take some resources already. Okay, so we are almost time. Again, like I mentioned earlier, that I do believe it's in network's best interest. We have been having this conversation for the past 2 months now as core dev on the scope of NV 18. Again, a lot of people are waiting for an update. And I think we do have enough information, data points that we have been considering over the past months. I still think the goal for today is for us to have a consensus on what we should do on NV 18, but with very precise next steps. Given everything that's being mentioned, here is my summary. We are gonna stay this. We're gonna Ayush, I heard you. It's if we have additional resources, maybe help us implementing migration. Maybe we can make everything for the March 1st. But to me, it's again, very optimistic, saying we should not plan on imaginary resources that just coming up. We don't want to subtouch the FEVM timeline. So I do have my reservation on that. So I'm gonna, I hope you understand. I think you understand, because I see you are nodding the head slightly. So with everything being said, what I'm gonna say here is keep the scope as it is to ship FEVM. Commit to the March 1st timeline as it is today, with the precise action item being one team should, a DRI should be appointed to start implementing SDM. A DRI should be appointed to drive landing FIP 47. A DRI should be appointed to fix the activation bug, which is built-in actor issue 914, I believe. NDRI should be appointed to analyze the timeline, the cutoff timeline of FEVM code freeze doesn't happen by this date. That means we will switch the context of NV18 to SDM. and then a DRI should be appointed to analysis how can we perform another upgrade sooner after, like in general for the longer term, but especially after FEVM to include SDM so after. We should commit to implement, I guess like the consensus is like if we are not doing SDM in NV18, we should commit to we should send the signal to the community that core devs are committed to land SDM in NV19. Time TBD, but target in early Q2. Ish, go ahead.
I agree with almost everything you said. I think the only thing I would suggest a change to is in terms of that cutoff date where if we see the FEVM code free slipping, instead of saying that SDM will jump the queue along with any other changes that we want to make, I think the right thing to do at that point is to say we will incorporate it into network version 18. I think that's a better way to protect our interests of the FEVM's timeline while also accommodating, but also not allowing this to sit unchanged for longer than it needs to, extremely longer than it needs to.
Maybe that discussion can go on beyond this meeting, but my first position is that our commitment to not breaking the network that we're holding by taking the FVM on its own first, I think is a reasonably strong thing to take as our first priority. And so I'd rather not do them both at once.
Also to reiterate CEL does suggest STDM should land sooner rather than later for the network's best interest. Okay, so with everything being said, unofficial vote pooling, sentiment pooling, is that the word we're using? Anyone that has strong objections on the final scope with everything considered? That means you have objections, right? Like
no, which is why I let someone else go first.
Wait, I'll quickly wait for another 10 seconds. If no one speaks, I would assume we reached consensus. Cool. Great.
Sorry, I do want to say one thing, and this is not a strong objection, but just as we all think about whether we've reached consensus, whether we're happy here, I think the difficulty that I personally am facing when asked to make a recommendation here is I'm not sure what to optimize for, because we're trying to protect a bunch of different things at once. We're trying to protect the FEVM's timeline, acknowledging the FEVM as the important or an important improvement that will be landing in Filecoin in this quarter. We're trying to protect the poor rep security of the network, and that's where FIT47 and so on gets factored in. We're trying to protect the crypto economic security of the network, which I will admit is something that I don't personally understand as well, and therefore have a harder time gauging, timelines and impacts. And then we're trying to protect things like user impact of a complicated migration and like the reputation damage to the FEVM if the network upgrade winds up being problematic because of the migration and so on, which is a less important and somewhat messier domain. I don't know which one to prioritize, and I feel like depending on what we treat as the most important, I come up with different answers in terms of what I would personally recommend. I don't know, so I think for me, when we talk about like whether we have objections or whether we've achieved consensus, it slightly comes down to which of those very orthogonal domains to prioritize.
I guess I have one more point from maybe like a more practical perspective regarding what moving forward. We did say that governance and implementation are decoupled. So do people here think that it's best for CEL to just move forward with last call, regardless of what is decided here in terms of implementation, just so that we know that this FIB will be a part of the network? And then that is decided, the implementation part can follow from this discussion.
It depends a little bit what you mean by implementation part. Like the FIP has to fully specify what's going to happen, including all these decisions about whether we need a migration and what state we need to store and those things. But given a fully specified FIP, yes, 100%. Let's get it into last call.
Okay, the reason I say this is because like the version of the FIP that is currently in draft was planning on being put into last call for the NV18 upgrade per the NV18 upgrade timeline. So if implementers here don't think there's anything glaring missing from the spec of the FIP itself, it seems to me that CEL will propose the version of the FIP that is best for the network that can be accepted or not, depending on what happens in the last call period. And then implementers will, whether or not it's an NV18, NV19, or however that shakes out, is completely separate from the FIP being accepted when it comes to governance.
100%. Yeah, I feel like we kind of didn't have the best like habit here, but like I always feel like the writing and governance process should like happens way before we have to cut close to network upgrades. So like once you have the FIP ready, I think FIP also should propose the best best changes for the network. Like it goes through the governance process, and then we can we will let it move, and once it's accepted, then it's ready for the network inclusion.
Cool. So like to summarize for playback to you, TLDR is whenever the FIP is, like as soon as the FIP is ready for last call, put it forward to last call, and then we can go from there. Sound good? Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, but make that the best version of the FIP that you think. Don't
compromise
timeline first, and then try to make the FIP fit in it. Make the best version of the FIP.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. Final point too. We have a lot of FIPs that are on the verge of being ready for last call, and knowing that we're not going to include for right now SDM in NV18, we can sort of like promote its last call separately. So organizationally, it might help with some of the community management too. So yeah, to reiterate Jennifer's point that we should leave with firm consensus and not waver from it.
Cool. Yeah, this is definitely like one of the tough ones, and I'm also like again like looking for like feedbacks on like how this process, like we never had such like heated or like discussion we had, but like this is one of the toughest one. So like if you have any feedbacks on how we should proceed and like make the best decision for the network, please do let Caitlin know. We are trying to improve like how core devs should like support the network. So but yeah, if you have any feedbacks, let us know. Cool. Next slide.
That's your last slide, Jennifer.
I guess if nothing else, do you want to close the call?
Sure. Yeah. So staff's still out of office. We'll try and get meeting notes up ASAP since there was a lot of important information today. I also want to say thanks so much. Everyone worked really hard over the last couple of weeks, which is incredible considering all the holidays. And I think it's really important that folks did that and really appreciated. Also, I know it's always really hard and every upgrade is pretty unique, but I'm actually really impressed by how we have been able to make decisions. I know it doesn't always feel that way, but this is a really orderly, concise, and clear call. And so thanks everyone for bringing your opinions. I think we're actually getting a lot better at this, and that's a really, really good thing. So thanks Vic and Jennifer also for leading your conversations, and we will see everyone next month.